Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Friday Night Spotlight, brought to you by Jones Ford Buick GMC, your hometown dealer for more than 50 years. I am Brian Wright, and I'm joined by Maria Vasquez. And of course, we are talking high school football playoffs once again. And, the biggest takeaway from last week was that we had quite a few teams in it, and now we're down to only two. So, we had a couple teams, unfortunately, that had to bow out due to forfeits due to COVID-19. That was Apache Junction and Sequoia Pathway. And then we had a couple teams play and lose. Post and Butte was an upset for sure. Um, and then we had Superior. They lost in the 1A semifinals to Williams. So let's talk about the two teams that are left. And we're going to start with the 4A playoffs. So basically, at this point, we're in the quarterfinals. There's 8 teams left. And Casa Grande is the number 1 seed, and they are going to host number 8 Peoria. And Peoria, of course, was the beneficiary of Apache Junction's forfeit win. So they did not play last week. Meanwhile, Casa Grande struggled a little bit early with Lake Havasu and then just put a whooping on them in the second half. They won that game 62-28. So, Maria, when you take a look at Casa Grande versus Peoria, what are your thoughts?
So for CG, we've talked about them all season long, and that's quarterback Angel Flores and running back RJ Keaton. Now, between these two guys, they've racked up almost 30 touchdowns just between them. RJ Keaton, he has 15 rushing touchdowns and 605 yards to go with that. And Angel Flores, he's just been a really solid quarterback in his junior season for the Cougars this year. 14 touchdowns, already over 1,000 passing yards, and he has a 69% completion rate.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 14 touchdowns, and that's just rushing. I believe he has 11 passing touchdowns to go with that. And yeah, those two guys are the guys that carry that offense. They each average over 100 rushing yards a game. And, Keaton is kind of a really interesting story because he's been kind of battling a little bit of a nagging ankle injury all year. So he missed a couple games, but when he's played, he's just been so dominant. And I got to throw this stat out there, which is probably one of the craziest stats I've seen in football in a while. And that's that Keaton, he's run the ball 55 times this year and he has 15 touchdowns. So, the percentage of his carries that end up in touchdowns is astronomical. And I guess, the question is, what kind of challenge is Peoria going to provide to the Cougars? And what do you see on that front?
So you mentioned it, Peoria. They didn't play last week because AJ had a forfeit. So they're going to be well rested. I think that's going to be a slight benefit for them. Then you also have quarterback Jason Heffley, and he already has over 900 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, but he does have 5 interceptions. The plus side here is that he's really good at distributing the ball between 4 other guys. For Peoria, you have Isaac Moreno, Terrion Amix, Jeremiah Gossett, and Brandon Price. So, with other quarterbacks, there's not just like this one guy you have to focus on. Peoria really does spread the ball around.
I think Peoria, if you had to look at a strength for them, it would be balance. They seem to run the ball and pass it somewhat equally effectively. But I think one thing that's really going to hurt them is that they don't really have any explosive players. I mean, when you look at guys, who can really beat you over the top, can take the ball to the house. Their lead running back, Cameron Mack, he only averages 4.8 yards a carry, which is pretty pedestrian. And, the Casa Grande run defense has been very good all year. And like you said, their quarterback, he hasn't put up really impressive numbers either. And he does have a few interceptions. And we know what Casa Grande can do with quarterbacks who don't protect the ball. They picked off Lake Havasu quarterback Donnie Fitzgerald 3 times last week, and they've forced a lot of turnovers this year. So, what do you think? You're going to see from Casa Grande on Friday?
Well, defensively, two guys that really stand out are Jacob Thomas and Jake Silvestre. These guys are pretty much leading the Cougars defensively. Thomas already has 2.5 sacks, and then Silvestre, he has 2 interceptions to go with that. So you mentioned it, if Peoria doesn't do a good job of protecting the ball, the Cougars are going to capitalize on those mistakes.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to the Casa Grande offensive line too, because when you have two guys, I mean, Angel Flores and RJ Keaton are both outstanding athletes, but when you look at, the kind of yards per carry they're averaging and the way that they are dominating, you got to have good blocking up front. And definitely the Cougars have had that. And, Casa Grande's a team that's just going to, the interesting thing about them is they don't line up in like a power formation, and run the ball with like, a couple tight ends and stuff. They really like to spread it out. I mean, they spread out, they run plays out of the shotgun and they do zone read, and they're just so effective at doing that. And, I think they're going to continue to do that and be successful doing that on Friday. Let's move on to our 2A matchup, which is Santa Cruz Valley, and they're going to be hosting Scottsdale Prep. Now, of course, I got to get back to this whole seeding fiasco, which is Santa Cruz is somehow the number 3 seed, which is a joke to me because there's nobody in Class 2A that compares to Santa Cruz. They should have been the overwhelming number 1 seed. However, like, I said, they are the number 3. So Scottsdale Prep is the number 6 seed, and Santa Cruz is going to host this game. Last week, Santa Cruz just beat Veritas Prep like a piñata, 60-6. And Scottsdale Prep, meanwhile, thought I had written down what they did last week. I don't have that in front of me. But, both teams are 6-1. And Maria, you covered that game last week again with Santa Cruz playing Veritas Prep. So, what did you see in that ball game?
So we talk about Santa Cruz's running game offensively, but last week it was all about their defense. And the guy I have to highlight here is Wyatt Ogle. He's Hunter Ogle's youngest brother. We talk about Hunter Ogle all the time. So today I want to talk about Wyatt. So just defensively over the past 3 games, Wyatt already has 6 interceptions for 129 yards. Now, as a team, total team defense, Santa Cruz has 16 interceptions. So Wyatt alone, he has, more than half of those interceptions all by himself. So just, a junior, he also plays quarterback. Santa Cruz doesn't throw the ball a lot, but when he does, he makes sure that it's in a good place where his receivers can go and get it, whether that's Orlando Davis Jr. or Dylan Hukel.
Yeah, you mentioned the individual play of Ogle picking off passes, Wyatt Ogle picking off passes, and of course the team as well. And against Veritas Prep, they picked off the Veritas Prep quarterback 6 times. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And like you said, Wyatt Ogle, he doesn't throw the ball much, but when he has to, he can do it, and he can put the ball on the money. He was 5 out of 6. For 102 yards and a touchdown. He did have 1 interception on his 1 incompletion, but I think that's kind of key, especially down the road if they get into more competitive games, where maybe they can't run the ball as easily as they want to. Wyatt Ogle has that ability to kind of throw the football and, beat teams that way if they're going to play the run. And Scottsdale Prep, again, they don't have anybody that really stands out as a huge playmaker. They do have a wide receiver, Devin Strader, who's put up some pretty good numbers. He has 387 yards, which is not huge, but he has 8 touchdowns. They've only played 7 games. So he's definitely a threat. And one guy who's interesting to me to watch for is this running back they have, Carson Boyle, because he only has 35 carries all year, but he's averaging 12 yards a carry. And last week he had over 100 yards. So, he might be somebody to watch for Santa Cruz. But, when you look at this matchup, Maria, do you see Scottsdale Prep being able to give Santa Cruz any issues?
I don't see Santa Cruz having any problems at all. I mean, the quarterback, Oscar Frias for Scottsdale Prep, yes, he has over 900 passing yards, a 54% completion rate, and 12 touchdowns to go with that. But he also has 4 interceptions. And like I mentioned earlier, interceptions are not a problem for the Santa Cruz defense. In addition to that, they also have 29 tackles for a loss, 12 of which are sacks for 68 yards. So you have guys, they're expecting to have the Castillo twins back. They missed last week's games, but you had some guys really step up for them, and they have all season long, like Mauricio Lopez, Davin Eppington, Robert Maldonado, Chandler Gill, Elijah Tejas. I mean, you can just name any guy on the Santa Cruz roster, and you can see that they have an impact on the game.
Yeah, and I think that just speaks to their great depth, which they do have great depth. And you mentioned if they get a couple of these other starters back, I mean, geez, it's almost not even fair. Their running game, as always, is great. They rushed for over 400 yards last week. Hunter Ogle went for 150 yards, which for him is kind of just like, average. That's just it's almost like a subpar game for Hunter Ogle running for 150 yards. But he obviously they didn't need him to do anything more than that. And then Ricardo Alaniz, he's a guy who he doesn't get as many carries, but he can really bust one. I often talk about explosive plays, and he only had 4 carries in that game, but he rushed for 116 yards. He had a 75-yard run in that game. So, he's another weapon for the Dust Devils. Any final thoughts on this game, Maria, on Friday?
So you mentioned weapons, and another guy I have to highlight is Dylan Hugel. Now, he missed last season to an injury from a previous sport, but so far this year he has 193 receiving yards, two touchdowns to go with that. And then defensively, he also has 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 1 fumble recovery. So he's a really fun guy to watch play. And the Dust Devils, they're excited to have him back this year.
Yeah, well, seeding controversy aside, I think the Dust Devils are going to be just fine on Friday against Scottsdale Prep, and we'll see how they do in that one. That does it for our breakdown on our 2 playoff games this week. Remember to visit PinalCentral.com for all of your Pinal County football action, and we will see you next week.